Morning arrived in New York City just as it always did. Not with the chirping of birds or cool dew, but with the impatient blare of taxi horns and the distant rumble of the subway. A streak of gray light slipped through the gap in the curtains of Claire's bedroom, falling exactly on the pillow next to hers, the pillow that for the past 3 years had remained empty. She didn't need an alarm to wake up. Her body was wired to the schedule of a single mother, an internal clock triggered by responsibility and memories. She stretched slowly, feeling a dull ache in her lower back, the residual fatigue from the days before. In the brief silence, she let herself float in that liminal space between sleep and wakefulness. It was an empty void where grief felt the most real right before she had to put on her mask of resilience. In the next room, her 8-year-old son Leo was still fast asleep, his breathing steady and peaceful. Claire often peeked in on him in the mornings just to make sure that amidst the chaos of her life, there was still one thing whole and perfect. Leo was her anchor, the center of her universe. Without him, she probably would have drowned long ago in the ocean of sorrow left behind by Adam Newman, her husband. A name that now resided more often in her thoughts than on her lips. 3 years ago, the world tore Adam away from her. A speedboat accident in remote waters off the coast of Central America during a corporate retreat. At least that was the official report she received. There was no body, only wreckage and some belongings found floating in the water. The Wall Street investment firm where Adam worked handled everything swiftly, providing her with a death certificate, a generous life insurance payout, and condolences that felt cold and rehearsed. They gave her fake closure, a period at the end of a sentence that had no actual ending. How could she feel a sense of closure if there was no grave to visit, no body to mourn? All she had was an empty mahogany casket they had buried in a cemetery in upstate New York, a symbol of the emptiness gnawing at her heart. She got out of bed, tied her hair into a messy bun, and walked to the kitchen. Their modest apartment in Brooklyn was a silent witness to her journey. Every corner held traces of Adam, the bookshelf he had built with his own hands, the collection of vintage vinyl records they used to listen to on Saturday nights, even the tiny scratch on the wall near the light switch from his watch. For 3 years, Claire hadn't changed a thing. She was terrified that moving even a single item would erase a memory. She lived inside a private museum surrounded by the ghosts of past happiness. As she flipped pancakes for Leo's breakfast, her mind drifted. New York had felt increasingly suffocating lately. The towering skyscrapers seemed to crush her space to breathe. The endless gridlock felt like a reflection of her own life stuck. Unable to move forward, she worked hard, running an online baking and catering business from home, taking orders for custom cakes and small events. It was enough to keep them afloat, to pay the rent and Leo's school fees. She was independent. She was strong. Everyone praised her, telling her how tough she was for raising Leo all on her own. But nobody knew that at night when Leo was asleep, that toughness often crumbled into silent tears soaking her pillow. She wasn't physically exhausted from working. She was exhausted from having to be strong all the time. She missed Adam. She missed his hugs, his soothing voice, his ability to make every problem seem trivial. She missed the old version of herself, the woman who could laugh freely without the shadow of grief. "Mom, we're still going, right?" Leo's sleep-roughened voice broke her reverie. The boy was standing in the kitchen doorway, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand. Claire smiled, a genuine smile she reserved only for her son. "Course we are, buddy. Eat your breakfast first. The pancakes are almost done." Leo nodded enthusiastically and sat at the kitchen island. "I already packed the toys I want to bring. The transformer and my cars." "Good job. Don't forget your swim trunks," Claire said, setting a plate of warm pancakes with maple syrup in front of him. They were going away. It was an impulsive decision she had made last week. That night, while organizing a small storage closet, she had found an old box of Adam's things. Inside were a few travel brochures. One of them was about the beautiful beaches of Maui, Hawaii. There was a handwritten note from Adam on the glossy paper. He had circled a beachfront villa and scribbled below it, "Someday the 3 of us will go here." Seeing that handwriting was like being stabbed with a dull blade, painful. Yet it awakens something inside her. An unfulfilled promise. Right then and there. She opened her laptop and booked the flights in a hotel. She needed this. They needed this. They needed to escape New York for a while, to get away from the apartment full of memories, from the exhausting routine. She wanted to give Leo new experiences, to see him laugh under a tropical sun instead of the shadows of concrete towers. And maybe, just maybe, in a new place, she could find a sliver of happiness for herself, to turn the page like her friends always advised her to do. For the past few days, Leo hadn't stopped talking about the trip. His eyes lit up every time he mentioned the word beach or airplane. His enthusiasm was contagious, giving Claire an energy she hadn't felt in a long time. She packed with vigor, digging out summer clothes long hidden in the closet, imagining the ocean breeze on her face. This was the right thing to do. She was sure of it. After Leo finished eating and got dressed, Claire checked their preparations. The suitcases were by the door. Tickets and IDs were in her tote bag. She looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror. A woman in her early 30s with faint dark circles under her eyes that light makeup couldn't completely hide. A few gray hairs had begun to show among her dark brunette waves. Loss had left its mark not only on her heart, but on her face. Yet in her eyes there was still a spark, a sign that she hadn't given up. She was doing this for Leo, but today she wanted to do it for herself too. She took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as if lifting the entire weight of New York off her shoulders. "Ready, kiddo?" she asked. Leo, who was sporting a shark graphic tee and cargo shorts. Leo gave her a double thumbs up. "Ready, Mom." They stepped out of the apartment, locking the door behind them, a door that held 3 years of sorrow, laughter, and struggle. For the next week they would leave all of that behind. They were heading toward hope, toward an island that promised a new dawn. Claire gripped Leo's hand tightly, feeling the warmth and trust of her son. Her steps felt lighter. Maybe people were right. Sometimes you have to travel far away to find your way back to yourself. And for her that journey began today. The night before their departure to Hawaii. After Leo had fallen into a deep sleep, Claire couldn't close her eyes. She sat on the living room sofa, accompanied by a mug of herbal tea that was growing cold. The silence of the night made her vulnerable to memories. She opened an old photo album she had found alongside the travel brochure. Its dark brown faux leather cover was slightly peeling at the corners. The first page held a photo of her and Adam at a small coffee shop in Boston a few weeks after they first met. At the time, she was a senior majoring in graphic design, while Adam had just started his career at a financial securities firm. They met by chance through a mutual friend at an art gallery opening. Claire remembered her first impression of him perfectly. He was charming, not with flashy good looks, but with a quiet, grounding charisma. His smile was warm, his gaze sharp yet comforting. And the way he spoke was intelligent and highly confident. They exchanged numbers, and from that moment on, their conversations never seemed to end. Adam would willingly take the train from New York to Boston almost every weekend just to see her. She turned the page. There was a photo of them laughing at Coney Island, completely soaked after riding a water flume. A photo of Adam blowing out the candles on his 24th birthday cake. Adam was always full of surprises, always knowing how to make her feel special. He wasn't the type to buy generic flowers or chocolates. His gifts were always personal. A rare first edition from her favorite author, a charcoal sketch of her face that he drew himself, or a meticulously curated playlist. Their love grew simply and honestly, without drama, without pretense. Then she reached the pages she loved the most, yet found the most painful to look at. A series of photos from their spontaneous trip to Acadia National Park in Maine. The idea came from Adam on a random Friday night. "I'm bored of the city," he had said over the phone. "I'm picking you up at midnight. Let's go see the sunrise on Cadillac Mountain." Claire, who was stressed over her senior thesis, initially refused. But Adam had 1,000 ways of convincing her. She vividly remembered the bone-chilling cold as they drove up the mountain in the pitch black. She remembered how Adam held her hand tightly, shoving it into his heavy jacket pocket to keep it warm. They arrived at the summit while the sky was as dark as soot, joining dozens of others waiting for the same moment. Claire leaned her head on Adam's shoulder, feeling incredibly sleepy and freezing. But it all paid off when the first orange line appeared on the eastern horizon. Slowly but surely, the sky shifted from black to indigo, then purple, orange, and finally a brilliant gold. The Atlantic Ocean stretched out below them, catching the morning light. It was magical, surreal, like being on another planet. "It's so beautiful," Claire whispered, her breath forming small white clouds in the frigid air. "Not as beautiful as you," Adam replied, kissing the top of her head. "Right there, amidst the grandeur of nature," Adam proposed. "Not with a flashy diamond, but with a simple silver band engraved with a pattern of pine trees. Evergreen for a love that never fades," he had said. Tears of joy streamed down Claire's freezing cheeks. "Of course," she said. "Yes." That moment was etched forever in her memory, a peak of happiness that felt so incredibly real. The photo in the album captured the second just after it happened. Their faces were flushed from the cold, their eyes sparkling with love and hope against the spectacular Acadia sunrise. Their wedding a year later was small but warm, attended only by close family and best friends. They started their new life in this very Brooklyn apartment, the same apartment that now felt so hollow. The first few years of their marriage were the happiest days of Claire's life. They built everything from scratch, supporting each other's dreams. Claire started her freelance design business from home, while Adam's career in finance skyrocketed. He was hard-working, ambitious, and brilliantly adept at reading the market. The arrival of Leo 2 years later completed their joy. Adam was an incredible father. He never hesitated to change diapers, warm up bottles in the middle of the night, or sing lullabies. He could spend hours playing on the floor or building massive Lego sets with his son. Watching Adam and Leo interact always made Claire's heart swell. Her family felt perfect. She had everything she had ever dreamed of. But slowly, things began to change. The higher Adam climbed the corporate ladder, the less time he spent at home. His business trips became more frequent and lasted longer. Even when he was physically home, his mind often wasn't. His eyes were glued to his laptop screen displaying complex market graphs, or he had a Bluetooth earpiece in taking calls from clients in different time zones. The warmth was slowly eroded by busyness. Claire tried to be understanding. She knew her husband was working hard for their future. "Just be patient, honey. This is all for Leo, for us. Soon, once everything stabilizes, I promise I'll have more time," Adam would always say whenever Claire tried to express her frustration. So she tried to be patient. She convinced herself this was just a temporary phase. But the phase never ended. She began to feel lonely inside her own marriage. She missed the old Adam, the one who would drop all his work just to sit on the couch with her, eating popcorn and watching a movie. The one who would listen to her talk all day without being distracted by phone notifications. She tried to communicate, to express how she felt, but Adam always brushed it off with the same promises. Claire noticed a heavy burden in her husband's eyes. There was a tension in his jaw that had never been there before. But every time she asked, Adam just smiled a tight smile and said everything was fine. Then came that day. The day Adam packed for a 3-day corporate retreat off the coast of Central America to meet with offshore investors. There was nothing unusual about it. It was a routine trip. Adam kissed her forehead, hugged Leo tightly, and promised to bring back souvenirs. That was the last time she saw her husband alive. Days passed, and Adam didn't come home. His phone went straight to voicemail. Claire started to panic. She called Adam's office, but they couldn't reach him either. The news broke the next morning. A sudden, violent tropical storm. A speedboat that lost contact. His name on the passenger manifest. Claire's world collapsed. She closed the photo album with trembling hands. The tea in her mug was ice cold. Those memories, no matter how beautiful, now felt like a double-edged sword. She stood up and walked into the bedroom, looking at her son's peaceful face. The boy only had vague memories of his father, memories that Claire kept alive through stories and photos. Leo was the most precious thing Adam had left behind. The only reason she had to keep walking forward. She pulled the blanket over his small shoulders and kissed his forehead. She made a promise to herself in Hawaii. She would focus on the present, on Leo's laughter, on the small moments of joy they could create together. She wouldn't let the ghosts of the past ruin their hope for the future. She had to do it for Leo and for her own sanity. That day 3 years ago began like any other. Claire was feeding Leo, who was only 5 at the time, while occasionally glancing at the wall clock. Adam should have called by now, like he always did when he was traveling. He made time to say a quick hello to Leo before the boy went to kindergarten, but by 9 a.m. there was no incoming call. Claire tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. She sent a few texts asking if his meetings were going well. No reply. At first she just felt a bit annoyed. Maybe he was too busy. Or maybe cell service on the island was genuinely awful. She tried to brush off the strange feeling creeping into her chest. By the afternoon, that feeling morphed into anxiety. She called Adam's firm again, and a receptionist with a flat voice informed her that they still hadn't been able to contact the team that went down there. Anxiety slowly evolved into panic as evening fell and Adam's phone remained dead. She paced the living room, clutching her phone as if the device was her only lifeline to her husband. Leo, sensing his mother's distress, became unusually quiet, sitting on the rug, playing with his action figures without making a sound. The call that finally came wasn't from Adam, but from the head of human resources at his firm. The man's voice sounded hesitant, laced with practiced sympathy. He spoke of an incident, of unforeseen severe weather, of a speedboat losing contact. Every word out of his mouth felt like a sledgehammer to Claire's chest. The world stopped spinning. She didn't remember exactly what she said in response. All she remembered was her legs giving out, collapsing onto the hardwood floor, and the sound of her own wailing filling the apartment. 2 corporate representatives arrived at her door the next morning. They wore expensive dark tailored suits. Their faces were set in expressions of trained grief. They sat on the sofa Adam usually occupied, placing their briefcases on the coffee table. They spoke in calm, measured tones, explaining the chronology of events with excruciating detail. The speedboat carrying Adam and 3 colleagues had been hit by a freak storm on their way back to the mainland. The Coast Guard had been deployed. Some wreckage and briefcases were found, including Adam's, but there were no signs of survivors. They used phrases like, "The probability of survival is highly unlikely," and search and recovery operations are ongoing. They handed her a thick manila envelope containing documents and an initial insurance payout. They promised the firm would cover all expenses and handle the logistics. They were so professional, so efficient, and that was exactly what made Claire sick to her stomach. They talked about her husband as if he were a lost corporate asset, a liability written off on an annual report. The days that followed were a thick fog. Claire didn't remember when she ate or slept. Her phone rang constantly. Condolence texts flooded in. Family and friends came and went, bringing castles she never touched, offering hugs she couldn't feel. She moved like a robot, answering questions with murmurs, accepting sympathy with blank nods. She just wanted to be alone, but people kept coming, filling her apartment with quiet sobbing and pitying whispers. The only thing that could pierce that fog was Leo. Her son would wrap his arms around her legs or ask innocent questions that shattered her heart. "Mommy, why are you crying? When is Daddy coming home? How do you explain the concept of death to a 5-year-old? How do you tell him that the father he idolized is never walking through that door again?" She tried different ways. She said, "Daddy went to a place very far away." She said, "Daddy was a star in the sky now." Leo would pause trying to process it and then ask, "But when is he going to call? I miss him." Every question was a fresh cut into Claire's gaping wound. A week passed. The Coast Guard called off the search. No bodies were recovered. Adam was officially declared lost at sea and presumed dead. Her world, which had collapsed, was now pulverized into dust. Without a body, there was no proper burial, no final resting place to say goodbye. The emptiness was absolute torturous. Adam's extended family debated what to do. His mother insisted they hold a memorial service to put his soul to rest. Claire just stayed silent, too exhausted and broken to argue. She felt like a spectator in the tragedy of her own life. Ultimately, they held a symbolic funeral. They bought an empty mahogany urn and buried it in his family's plot in upstate New York. Claire stared at that urn with hollow eyes. It was the perfect representation of how she felt inside. Empty, cold, and fragile. The day of the service, the New York sky was overcast. As if mourning with them. She wore a black dress and put Leo in a tiny black suit. She gripped his hand tightly throughout the procession. She saw the pitying faces around her, heard the distant relatives sobbing, but she herself couldn't cry. Her tears had dried up. All that was left was a freezing void. When the empty urn was lowered into the ground and covered with dirt, Claire felt like a part of herself was buried with it. Her hopes, her laughter, the future she had envisioned, all buried in that plot. No body, no closure, just a gaping hole in her heart that she knew would never be filled. After the funeral, life had to go on. That's what people said. But how? Claire felt like she was running on a treadmill, moving constantly but never getting anywhere. She started building high walls around her heart. She learned to smile when she was screaming inside. She learned to answer, "I'm doing okay." While her soul was in pieces, she threw herself into her baking business, pouring all her energy into work and raising Leo. She had to be strong. She had no other choice. If she collapsed, who would hold Leo up? For 3 years she lived like that. She became an expert at hiding her wounds. She became the fiercely independent woman people admired. But only she knew how brittle she was inside. The walls protected her from pain, but they also locked her in isolation. She didn't let anyone get too close. She was terrified of experiencing loss again. Losing Adam was more than enough for one lifetime. She accepted her fate, living with the ghost of her husband, raising their son alone. She thought this was how the rest of her life would play out. A flat routine, a life lived out of obligation. Until she found that brochure, and a stubborn tiny seed of hope began to sprout in her frozen heart. A hope for a little warmth, a hope for a new beginning. The morning of their departure felt different. The New York air, usually heavy with exhaust and noise, felt a little lighter today. Or maybe it was just Claire's imagination. Leo was up before dawn, far too excited to sleep. He ran laps around the apartment, checking his little backpack repeatedly to make sure his favorite toy wasn't left behind. "Mom, I get the window seat on the plane, right?" he asked, tugging at the hem of Claire's shirt. Sweetie. "The window is all yours," Claire replied, smiling. Her son's laughter and endless chatter were the sweetest music to her ears. Leo's pure, unburdened joy was infectious. For the first time in years, Claire felt a genuine sliver of happiness creeping into her chest. She looked at her son's glowing face, knowing her decision to take this trip was the right one. The ride to JFK International Airport was filled with Leo's non-stop commentary. He pointed at every massive tour bus, every 18-wheeler, and every bridge they crossed with sheer awe. Claire responded with smiles and brief answers, letting her mind wander. She felt like she was pulling up a massive anchor that had been holding her ship in place. An anchor named New York, named routine, named grief. The chaos of JFK welcomed them. The echoing flight announcements. The rumble of suitcase wheels on the terrazzo floors. The thousands of people rushing to their respective destinations. A busy microcosm of the world. Normally crowds like this gave her a headache, but today she felt it as positive energy. The energy of motion and change. After checking their bags, they sat at the gate waiting for boarding. Leo pressed his face against the massive glass window, his eyes wide as he stared at the giant jets parked on the tarmac. "Mom, which one is ours?" he asked. Claire pointed to a large Boeing with the airline's logo on the tail. Looks like that one. Whoa, it's huge. We're gonna fly above the clouds, right, Mom? Yes, baby. Way above the clouds. When they finally called their boarding group, Claire's heart beat a little faster. This was real. They were actually leaving. She held Leo's hand as they walked down the jet bridge. A smiling flight attendant greeted them. They found their row, settling Leo into the window seat just as he wanted. Claire helped him with his seat belt, then buckled her own. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nerves and profound relief. The plane pushed back and eventually roared down the runway. Leo kept his hands pressed to the window, his face a mix of tension and wonder. With a powerful thrust, the plane lifted off the ground, leaving New York below them. The skyscrapers looked like miniatures, the terrible traffic looking like a slow-moving line of ants. The higher they flew, the smaller the city became, until it was entirely swallowed by a thick layer of white clouds. Felt symbolic. She was leaving all her burdens down there. Above the clouds, the world was serene. The blue sky stretched endlessly, the sun shining brightly. Leo laughed in delight. Claire pulled out a coloring book and crayons from her bag to keep him occupied. She leaned her head back, trying to relax, letting the hum of the jet engines become a soothing background noise. For the first few hours of the long flight over the Pacific, everything was perfect. She felt at peace, a rarity for her. She was half asleep when Leo yanked on her sleeve with surprising force. Mom, look, he whispered urgently. Claire opened her eyes. What is it, honey? Leo didn't answer. He just pointed toward the front of the cabin, down the aisle, several rows ahead of them. Mom, that's Dad, he whispered again. Quieter this time, as if it were a massive secret. Claire's heart stopped beating for a fraction of a second. Then her brain took over. She stroked her son's hair. No, sweetie. That's not Daddy. It's probably just someone who looks like him. She was used to this. Sometimes Leo would point out strangers at the mall or in the park and say the exact same thing. Kids who lost a parent often did that. It was part of their longing. It really is him, Leo insisted, his innocent eyes staring at Claire with absolute certainty. She saw him. To appease Leo, Claire slowly turned her head, following the direction of his pointing finger. There, about 5 or 6 rows ahead, a man was standing in the aisle, leaning over slightly to talk to a young woman sitting in the aisle seat. He was wearing a beige linen shirt, a tan baseball cap pulled low, and sunglasses resting on the bridge of his nose. From where she sat, Claire could only see his back and side profile. He was tall, his shoulders broad, just like Adam. But there were thousands of men with that build. Honey, I can't even see his face. Let it go. He just looks similar, Claire said, trying to sound as calm as possible, even though her heart was starting to hammer irregularly. A bizarre dark premonition was crawling up her spine. But the way he moves his hands, Mom, like, Dad, Leo wasn't giving up. Claire froze. She knew exactly what Leo meant. Adam had a very specific habit when he talked. His fingers would move, practically drawing shapes in the air to illustrate his point. And that man was doing the exact same thing. Claire swallowed hard. Her throat was bone dry. She tried to brush it off. This is insane. This is impossible. Adam is dead. I have his death certificate. I buried an urn for him. This is an illusion. My brain playing cruel tricks on me because of grief and exhaustion. She was about to gently scold Leo when the man shifted slightly to let a flight attendant squeeze past. That minor movement gave her a clear view of the side of his face for 2 seconds. 2 seconds that felt like an eternity. The cap shifted slightly. The sunglasses slid down just a fraction. And in that moment Claire saw it. An intimate, tiny detail. She could never ever mistake a thin, pale scar right under the left edge of his jawline. The scar from his dirt bike accident when they were in college in Boston. The scar she used to trace with her thumb when they held each other. The breath caught in Claire's throat. The world around her fell completely silent. The hum of the engines, the chatter of passengers, all of it vanished. The only thing left was the deafening war drum of her own heartbeat. Ice flooded her veins. Despite the warm cabin air, she was freezing. It's impossible. But her eyes weren't lying. That was Adam's scar. That man was Adam. Her husband, who had been dead for 3 years, was currently on the same flight to Hawaii, alive and chatting with another woman. The Boeing continued steadily at 3,000 feet, piercing the clouds toward the islands. Meanwhile, Claire's reality had just been violently thrown into a terrifying tailspin, a scar, a tiny detail that shouldn't mean anything to the rest of the world, but to Claire, it was the entire universe. It was a physical archive of a memory she kept locked away. She remembered that day clearly. Adam recklessly trying out a friend's dirt bike, wiping out on a slick downhill trail, coming home with a busted chin. Claire cleaning his wound in a panic, holding back tears as he winced in pain. That scar was proof of their youth, their recklessness, their love. And now that scar was on the jaw of a man who was supposed to be ash and bone, flying at 30 million feet, just a few rows ahead of her. Claire's mind spun wildly, outright refusing to accept what her eyes had just witnessed. Made no sense. It was a cruel impossibility. She had to be seeing things. The cabin lighting, her exhaustion, her chronic longing, they had all conspired to create the perfect mirage. She tried to breathe, but the air around her felt thin and empty. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying that when she opened them, the man would be gone, or he would turn out to be a complete stranger. She counted to 10 in her head, an old trick to calm down. 2. She felt Leo's small hand on her arm, still waiting for a response. 4. 5. She could hear the flight attendant asking if anyone wanted drinks. 7. 8. She had to stay calm for Leo. 10. She opened her eyes. The man was still there. He had sat back down in his seat, but he was turned slightly backward to continue his conversation with the woman beside him. His hat and glasses were still on. But from this angle, Claire could see the line of his mouth when he smiled. A familiar crooked smile. The way his upper lip lifted slightly more on the right side. Claire's heart dropped a second time. Her rational brain screamed that this was a coincidence. There are billions of people in the world. Surely someone out there has the same build, mannerisms, smile, and even the exact same scar as her late husband. The probability existed, no matter how microscopic. But her heart, her intuition, every single cell in her body screamed one word. Adam! Mom, why are you so pale? Leo asked. His gaze had shifted from the man back to his mother's face. Claire flinched. She forced a smile onto her stiff lips. I'm fine, baby, just a little dizzy, probably just motion sickness. She stroked Leo's hair, desperately trying to divert his attention. Do you want to color some more or listen to music? Leo shook his head. I want to go see Dad. Shoo! Claire hissed quietly. Not so loud. That's not Dad, Leo. We can't bother other people, okay? Even as she said the words, her eyes remained glued to the man's silhouette. She became a helpless stalker trapped in her own seat. She analyzed every tiny detail. The way he crossed his ankle over his knee. Exactly how Adam sat when he was relaxed. The way he tapped his fingers on the armrest when he was thinking. These were puzzle pieces forming a terrifying, impossible picture. The woman sitting next to him looked younger, maybe mid-20s. She had long light brown hair. She laughed breezily at something the man said, casually touching his forearm. A sharp pain pierced Claire's chest, a different kind of pain than the grief of loss. It was jealousy, an emotion she hadn't felt in a very long time. Who was she? His girlfriend. His new wife. Was Adam not actually dead? Did he fake his death to start a new life with this woman? The wild thoughts assaulted her brain, making her nauseous. No, that makes even less sense. Adam loved her. Adam worshipped Leo. He couldn't do something so deeply cruel. He wouldn't abandon them on purpose. Claire rested her head against the cold plastic window, turning her face away from the agonizing sight. She stared at the endless white clouds outside, searching for her sanity. She had to be hallucinating. 3 years of suppressing grief, 3 years of being strong all alone. Maybe her psyche had finally cracked. Maybe this vacation was the trigger. The hope for a new beginning had ripped open the old wound and made her see ghosts. Yes, that had to be the explanation. The man was just a stranger who looked eerily similar. She had to believe that. She had to ignore him. But she couldn't. The curiosity was an addiction. A few minutes later, she stole another glance. This time, the flight attendants were handing out customs forms. The man took off his sunglasses to read something on his phone. And for a fleeting moment, as the cabin light reflected off his screen, Claire saw his eyes clearly. Dark brown intense eyes under a sharp brow line. The same eyes that used to look at her with so much love. The same eyes that could calm her down with a single look. There was no more doubt in Claire's mind. It wasn't a look-alike. It was him. Adam Newman. A violent clash of emotions slammed into her. First, an overwhelming, blinding spark of joy. Adam is alive. My husband is alive. The hope she had buried deep in the ground suddenly erupted. But that joy was instantly crushed by a second massive tidal wave. Rage and betrayal. If he was alive, why did he disappear? Why did he let her and Leo walk through hell for 3 years? Why did he let his son grow up fatherless? Why did he let her weep over an empty patch of dirt in upstate New York? The questions swirled in her head like a hurricane, making her gasp for air. She wanted to unbuckle her seatbelt, storm down the aisle, stand right in front of him and scream his name. She wanted to slap his face, demand an explanation. But her legs felt bolted to the floor. She was trembling uncontrollably. What would she even say? And what if she was wrong? What if he was a total stranger who would look at her like she belonged in a psych ward? The fear of public humiliation kept her anchored. And there was Leo. She couldn't make a scene in front of her son. She had to stay calm at least until this plane landed. The remaining hours of the flight felt like a prison sentence. Claire couldn't focus on anything. She just sat in rigid silence, her eyes burning holes into the back of the man's head. She tried to formulate a plan. What should she do when they landed? Follow him, confront him, or run the other way? Pretend this was a nightmare and go on with her vacation. The last option felt the safest but also the most impossible. How could she ever resume a normal life knowing this? When the fastened seatbelt sign illuminated and the captain announced their initial descent into Kahului Airport, Claire's stomach was in knots. She looked out the window, seeing the lush green coastline of Maui. This place was supposed to symbolize hope and fresh starts. Now it felt like an arena where she had to confront the ghost of her past. The plane descended, its wheels hitting the tarmac with a dull thud. They had arrived. Claire's escape from New York was over. But she felt like she had just stepped into a far more suffocating labyrinth. She gripped Leo's hand tightly. Whatever was coming, she had to face it. She had no other choice. The ping of the intercom announcing that passengers could disembark snapped Claire out of her daze. People around her stood up, popping open overhead bins, creating a bottleneck in the aisle. Panic flared in Claire's chest. She had to make a decision and fast. If she just sat there, he would vanish into the crowd. Her chance to get answers to confirm her own sanity would be gone forever. "Hold on a sec, buddy. Let's wait until it clears out a bit," she told Leo, keeping him in his seat. She needed time. She needed to see which way the man went. Her heart hammered as she watched him and the young woman stand up. They pulled 2 duffel bags from the overhead compartment. The man put his sungle back on and tugged his baseball cap even lower as if trying to hide his face. An action that only fueled Claire's suspicion. They joined the slow-moving line in the aisle, shuffling toward the exit. Claire memorized the back of him. The beige linen shirt, the olive green cargo pants, the casual leather loafers. Once most of the passengers had cleared, Claire finally stood up. "Okay, let's go." She intentionally walked slowly, keeping a 10-foot distance behind the last group. They stepped off the jet bridge and into the terminal. The warm, humid Hawaiian air immediately embraced her, a stark contrast to the freezing terror in her heart. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for the man in the cap. She spotted him not far ahead, walking casually toward baggage claim with the woman. "Mom, where are we going?" Leo asked, confused by his mother's erratic. "Stop and start pacing." "We're just going to get our suitcases, honey," Claire replied. Her brain was in overdrive. She had to tail them without looking obvious. At the baggage carousel, she positioned herself further back, still keeping them in her line of sight. She watched them laugh. She watched him point at something on his phone to show the woman. They looked like a normal couple on vacation. The sight shredded her heart. Was this Adam's new life? A life where she and Leo didn't exist? After grabbing her own bags, Claire saw the man and the woman head toward the exit doors. She hastily grabbed her suitcase handle and half-jogged after them, pulling Leo along. She felt like a spy in a cheap thriller. She watched them approach a black sedan. A driver was holding a placard, but she couldn't read the name on it from this distance. Moments later they slipped into the back seat and the car pulled away. Claire stood paralyzed on the curb, feeling a sickening blend of relief and despair. She had managed to avoid a public meltdown, but she had lost him. "Mom, why are we just standing here? Which one is our cab?" Leo's voice brought her back to reality. Claire looked around. She was standing alone with her son amidst the bustling airport traffic. The man was gone. Maybe this was a sign. A sign that she needed to let it go. She needed to forget what she saw on the plane. It was just a look-alike. Had to be. She couldn't ruin this trip. Leo's one chance at happiness over her wild imagination. She took a deep breath, trying to scrape together the remnants of her composure. "Right here, baby. Let's grab this taxi." The ride to their hotel in Wea felt surreal. Outside the window, Maui's exotic beauty unfurled swaying palm trees, volcanic mountains, and pristine beaches. Leo was practically bouncing in his seat, pointing at everything. But Claire couldn't enjoy it. Her mind was back at the airport. The face, the scar, the smile, the doubt gnawed at her again. What if it was him? What if she had just let her only chance at the truth drive away in a black sedan? When they arrived at the beachfront resort, Leo's awe multiplied. The grand open-air lobby with its Hawaiian architecture, the massive infinity pool overlooking the Pacific, and the lush tropical gardens made him jump with joy. The incredibly polite staff greeted them with fresh flower leaves and tropical welcome drinks. Claire forced herself to smile, mirroring Leo's enthusiasm for his sake. They were escorted to their room on the 3rd floor. It was spacious with a private balcony facing the ocean. The view was breathtaking. "Whoa, we can see the ocean right from our room," Leo yelled, running to the glass doors. Claire dropped her bags and followed him out. The crashing of the waves was loud, the salty breeze blowing gently through her hair. For a brief second, the sheer beauty of it calmed her. She hugged Leo from behind, both of them watching the sun dip lower in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of peach and lavender. "Maybe I can do this," she thought. "Maybe I can forget the plane and just be here with my boy." They spent the late afternoon swimming in the pool. Seeing Leo laugh uncontrollably as he splashed around made Claire's heart thaw a little. She forced herself to be present. In that moment she played, splashing water back at him and laughing out loud. The physical exhaustion of swimming seemed to temporarily mute the screaming in her head. That night, after dinner at the hotel restaurant and putting an exhausted Leo to bed, Claire decided to sit alone on the balcony. She needed space to breathe. The sound of the ocean at night was heavier, more melancholic. She stared into the pitch-black horizon, illuminated only by the distant lights of boats. She felt so small, so entirely alone. The image of the man on the plane crept back in to haunt her. She pulled out her phone, opened her photo gallery, and stared at an old picture. Adam smiling, holding a baby Leo. She compared that smile to the one she saw on the plane. It's identical. Her heart wept. She was drowning in her misery when she faintly heard voices coming from below. Their room was on the 3rd floor, and the voices seemed to be drifting up from the balcony of the 2nd floor room directly beneath hers. Initially she didn't care. just other hotel guests talking, but then she heard a fragment of a sentence from a woman's voice. "Are you sure nobody saw us at the airport?" Claire froze. She held her breath, straining to listen. Then a man's voice replied. Deep, steady voice. A voice that made the hairs on the back of Claire's neck stand up. A voice that for the last 3 years she had only heard in home videos and nightmares. "Relax. We're clear." Claire's heart felt like it stopped entirely. That was Adam's voice. She couldn't be wrong. It was her husband. She crept slowly to the edge of the glass railing, trying to peer down, but the angle made it impossible. She could only listen. There was a brief silence. Then the woman spoke again, this time sounding a bit irritated and much clearer. "I hate having to hide like this. Adam. The name was spoken by another woman on a balcony directly below hers on an island that was supposed to be her sanctuary. That name hit Claire like a lightning bolt. There was no more doubt, no more questions. No more maybe it's a lookalike or I misheard. It was the naked, brutal truth. Her husband, Adam Newman, who she thought was dead, who she had wept over for 3 years, was right here, alive and with another woman. The name hung in the humid Hawaiian air, sharper than broken glass, heavier than a tombstone. Adam. Claire backed away from the railing. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to grab the doorframe to support her weight. Her legs felt like jelly. She stumbled back into the air-conditioned room, pulling the glass door shut soundlessly behind her. The roar of the ocean outside now sounded like a mockery. Nature roaring in laughter at the tragedy of her life. She leaned against the glass, her chest heaving as if an invisible hand was crushing her ribs. She wanted to scream. She wanted to shriek until her vocal cords tore. She wanted to run downstairs and kick that hotel door off its hinges, but she couldn't. Her eyes fell on the small figure sleeping soundly on the bed. Leo, his steady breathing was the only real thing grounding her in the hurricane tearing through her mind. Looking at her son's peaceful face, the blinding rage inside her was suddenly coated in a layer of freezing, piercing agony. This boy, this sweet boy, had cried himself to sleep, missing a father who was actually alive. This boy had learned to accept that his father was a star in the sky, a beautiful lie Claire had crafted to protect him from the bitter truth. And now the real truth was infinitely worse, infinitely more rotten than anything she could have imagined. This wasn't fate. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. Adam had chosen to abandon them. Sleep was an unreachable luxury that night. She sat in the armchair by the window, staring at the starless sky, her mind racing non-stop. Every memory of her grief over the past 3 years replayed with a cruel new narrative. Her midnight crying sessions, her struggles to pay bills alone, the days she was so tired she wanted to give up. All of it wasn't because her husband was dead. It was because he was a traitor. The funeral with the empty urn now felt like a sick joke. She hadn't been mourning a death. She had been played for a fool. The anger gave her a strange, chilling energy. She no longer felt sad or broken. She felt cold. A dangerous calm settled over her heart. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to ignore this. She was going to face this ghost and demand answers not just for herself, but for the 3 years of Leo's childhood that had been stolen. By the time the first light of dawn painted the sky in streaks of purple and orange, Claire had a plan. That morning, she acted as normally as possible around Leo. She ordered room service, colored with him, and listened to him babble about wanting to see dolphins. Wearing this mask of cheerfulness was the hardest thing she had ever done. Every smile felt like a razor blade against her lips. After breakfast, she persuaded Leo to check out the hotel's kids' club. "They have awesome games there, and you can meet some new friends," she said, keeping her voice light. Leo, who was naturally social, agreed enthusiastically. After ensuring her son was safe and happy with the resort staff, Claire had a few hours to herself. She went down to the lobby. Her heart pounded like a war drum. She sat on one of the sofas, pretending to read a magazine, her eyes hawk-like, scanning everyone who passed by. She waited. Every minute felt like an hour. She was almost ready to give up, thinking maybe they had already checked out when she saw her. The brunette woman, Mia, walking alone out of the elevators toward the valet stand, looking like she was heading out in a rental car. This was her chance. If the woman was leaving, it was highly likely Adam was somewhere in the hotel. Alone, Claire stood up and walked toward the open-air coffee shop tucked in the corner of the lobby. It was busy but not packed. She picked a table in the back corner, giving her a clear view of the lobby and the elevators. She ordered a black coffee, her hands shaking slightly as she held the mug. She waited again 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then the elevator doors opened and he walked out. Adam. He wasn't wearing his cap or sunglasses anymore. His face looked exactly as it did in Claire's memory, just slightly thinner with new lines of exhaustion around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. He walked casually toward the coffee shop, right toward her. Claire felt all the oxygen suck out of her lungs. Adam didn't seem to notice her. He walked to the counter, ordered a coffee, and chose a small table near the windows, facing away from her. It's now or never. Claire stood up. Every step felt impossibly heavy, like walking through water. She approached his table from behind. She could smell the faint scent of his cologne, the exact same cologne he always wore. She stood beside his table for a few seconds, just staring down at the top of his head as he scrolled through his phone. Claire took a deep breath, gathering every last ounce of strength she possessed. "Adam," she said. Her voice was raspier and colder than she anticipated. The man froze. His shoulders went rigid. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he lifted his head and turned. When his eyes met Claire's, all the color drained from his face. Shock, terror, guilt. Every emotion was plastered plainly across his features. His lips parted but no sound came out. He looked exactly like a man who had just seen a ghost. Ironic, Claire thought. Because I'm the one who's supposed to be haunted. Claire. He breathed. Her name sounded like a twisted prayer. "So rumors of your death were greatly exaggerated," Claire said, every syllable sharp and dripping with ice. She didn't sit down. She stood over him, holding the physical high ground. Adam stammered. "I can explain." "Oh, I'm absolutely sure you can." Claire shot back cynically. "I've had 3 years to wait for an explanation. Go ahead, start. I'm dying to hear what kind of fairy tale justifies this." Adam swallowed hard. His eyes darted around the coffee shop nervously, terrified of drawing a crowd. "Please just sit down, Claire. Please." Claire finally pulled out the chair across from him, but she sat bolt upright, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. She wasn't going to show an ounce of weakness. Adam began to talk. His voice was low and shaky at first. He spoke of a dark past, a massive investment failure, millions of dollars he had borrowed from the wrong people. Not a bank, a shadow syndicate, professional loan sharks who had no qualms about violence. He claimed the threat started coming not just for him, but explicitly naming Claire and Leo. He panicked. He felt trapped, backed into a corner with no way out. Then the opportunity came. He continued, his voice smoothing out slightly, as if reciting a story he had rehearsed in his head 1,000 times. The corporate retreat. The storm was real. The boat really did capsize. But I survived. I washed up on a tiny fishing island with barely a scratch. He paused, looking at Claire, begging for a flicker of understanding in her eyes. All he found was a gaze as cold as absolute zero. "That's when the insane idea hit me," he said. "This was my way out. If I was declared dead, they'd stop hunting me. They'd stop threatening you and Leo. It was the only way to protect you." Claire let out a low scoff, a sound of pure disgust. "Protect us?" she repeated in disbelief. "You call this protecting us? You let your son believe his father was dead. You made your wife a widow. You let us walk through hell completely alone and you call that protection. I know I was wrong. I know I'm a coward, Claire." Adam's voice cracked with desperation, but I couldn't think straight. "I just wanted you safe. Every single day for the past 3 years, I've lived in regret. Every day I thought about you both." "Oh yes, you look very regretful," Claire sneered, glancing pointedly around the resort. Living in Hawaii with another woman. You really look like a man in agony. Adam's face flushed. Mia has nothing to do with this. She just helped me build a new identity. A new life, Claire repeated bitterly. While Leo and I were trapped in the old one you destroyed. Your explanation is garbage, Adam. You're just a coward who ran away from his responsibilities. The anger and betrayal expanding in her chest made it hard to breathe. All his excuses felt hollow. Justifications he fabricated so he could sleep at night. It didn't change the fact that he had deliberately inflicted the cruelest pain imaginable on them. I'm not expecting you to forgive me, Adam said softly. But you have to believe me. I did this because I love you. Don't. Claire cut him off sharply. Do not ever use that word. You don't know the first thing about love. She stood up. She had heard enough. Being near him made her physically ill. I am not done with you, she threatened. But right now I have to go. My son is waiting for me. The son you abandoned. She turned on her heel and walked away without looking back, leaving Adam sitting frozen at his table, his face buried in his hands. Claire walked out of the coffee shop with steady strides. But inside, her world was more shattered than ever. Knowing the truth was far more agonizing than living the lie. After leaving Adam, Claire walked like a zombie toward the kids' club. Pure rage fueled her steps, but her mind was a chaotic mess. The conversation replayed on a loop. Every word, every excuse he gave felt like a slap. She felt like an idiot forever crying over him. An idiot forever missing him. She felt betrayed on a molecular level. When she arrived, she saw Leo happily building a wooden block tower with some other kids. His laughter drifted through the open door. For a moment, Claire just stood there watching her son. That boy was the only pure good thing left in her ruined life. She took a deep breath, plastered the mask back on and walked inside. Hey kiddo. Having fun? Leo ran over and hugged her legs. Yeah, Mom. I built the tallest tower. Wow, that's awesome, Claire said, forcing a bright smile. How about we hit the beach now? Sand castles and ocean waves. Leo's eyes lit up. Yes, she needed wide open spaces. She needed the crash of the ocean to drown out the noise in her head. The beach felt like the only place she could breathe. They went back to the room, changed into swimsuits, grabbed a plastic bucket and shovel, and walked down to the hotel's private cove. The warm white sand felt good beneath her feet. The sky was an impossible blue, the sun beating down. The Pacific stretched out before them, rolling in gentle waves. It was postcard perfect. An agonizing irony because a Category 5 hurricane was raging inside her heart. They found a shaded spot beneath a palm tree. Claire laid out the towels while Leo immediately sprinted toward the water, letting the foam wash over his feet. Claire sat on her towel, pulling her knees to her chest. She tried to focus on Leo, on his laughter, on his simple joy. But the image of Adam and Mia haunted her. She felt paranoid. She kept looking left and right, terrified they would magically appear on the same beach. She pulled out her phone, thinking of calling her mom in New York just to hear a familiar voice. But she stopped herself. What would she even say? Guess who isn't dead? She couldn't even begin to explain this madness. So she just sat in silence watching Leo play. She watched the other families on the beach. A dad teaching his daughter how to bodyboard. A husband and wife walking hand in hand along the shoreline. Normal scenes that now felt like salt rubbed directly into her wounds. That was supposed to be her life. That was the future ripped away from her. Not by an act of God, but by the selfish choice of the man she loved. About an hour later, as she was helping Leo build a moat for his sand castle, her eyes caught two figures walking down from the adjacent resort. Her heart instantly kicked into overdrive. Adam and Mia, they were coming to the beach too. As if the universe was actively mocking her. They walked in the opposite direction, clearly trying to find an isolated spot far away. But the cove wasn't that big. Claire could still see them clearly. She watched Mia lay out a beach mat. Adam just stood there staring out at the ocean, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Heat flared in Claire's chest. She wanted to pack up and leave immediately, but she didn't want to ruin Leo's fun. Her son was having the time of his life. So she decided to endure it, trying desperately to ignore them. She focused on digging the moat, but her eyes kept darting back to the two figures. Then something strange happened. Claire saw Adam, who had been standing perfectly still, suddenly tense up. He seemed to spot something or someone in the crowd of tourists walking along the beach path. He stumbled backward. Even from a distance, he looked ghostly pale. He grabbed Mia's arm, saying something in a panic. Mia looked confused. Adam kept whipping his head around, scanning the crowd frantically. Suddenly, he clutched his chest. His knees buckled. And a second later, he collapsed onto the sand. Mia's terrified scream cut through the sound of the crashing waves. "Help! Somebody help!" People nearby immediately turned. A few started running toward them. Claire froze. She watched Adam lying motionless on the sand. A part of her, the darkest, most bruised part, whispered, "Let him lay there, Karma." But the other part of her, the part that had been a devoted wife, and the part that was currently a mother, couldn't just sit there. "Lo, stay right here. Do not move," she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. Without a second thought, she sprinted across the sand. She pushed through the small crowd that had formed. Mia was crying hysterically, shaking Adam by the shoulders. "Exactly what you aren't supposed to do. Move!" Claire yelled with an authority that made Mia and the onlookers step back. She dropped to her knees beside Adam. His face was ashen, his lips tinted blue, and he was taking rapid, shallow, gasping breaths. This wasn't a heart attack. She recognized this. This was a severe panic attack. Her instincts took over. She had taken CPR and first aid classes back in Brooklyn, and the muscle memory kicked in. She yanked the collar of his shirt open to let him breathe and checked his pulse. It was racing but weak. "Give him some space. Back up," she yelled at the crowd. "Did someone call the hotel medics?" Tourist nodded. "Yes, they're coming." Claire turned back to Adam. She tapped his cheek firmly. Adam, listen to me. Look at me. You need to breathe in and out slowly." She forced her voice to be steady and commanding. Adam's eyelids fluttered, then shot open. His eyes, wild with absolute terror and confusion, locked onto Claire's in the midst of the chaos, surrounded by strangers. The first face he saw when he came to was the wife he had betrayed. The shock and deep shame were palpable in his eyes, even as he struggled for air. "See, Claire," he gasped. His voice barely a wheeze before Claire could respond. Hotel security and a medical team arrived with a stretcher. They immediately took control of the situation. As they lifted Adam onto the backboard, his shaking hand reached out and weakly grabbed Claire's wrist. The grip was pathetic, but filled with absolute desperation. "Please," he wheezed. "We have to talk again tonight. Coffee shop. I'll tell you everything." Claire just stared at him. She gently but firmly pried his fingers off her wrist, giving a single stiff nod. She stepped back, letting the medics whisk him away. Mia jogged alongside the stretcher, still sobbing. The crowd dispersed, returning to their vacations. Claire stood there alone, her own chest heaving from the adrenaline. She turned around and saw Leo standing a few feet away from their sand castle, staring at her with wide, confused eyes. She walked over and knelt in front of him. "It's okay, baby. That man just got a little sick." Leo looked in the direction the stretcher had gone, then back at his mom. "Mom, that was the guy from the plane, right?" he asked quietly. "The guy who looks like Dad. What happened to him?" Claire looked into her son's innocent eyes. She didn't know what to say. The fortress of lies she had built to protect him was cracking at the foundations, and she knew she couldn't patch it up alone anymore. She needed the whole story tonight, no matter how much it hurt. She hugged Leo tightly. "Yeah, buddy. That was the man from the plane. I'll explain it all later. Okay, let's go back to the room." The sky outside the hotel window had turned a deep indigo by the time Claire finally managed to get Leo to sleep. The boy went out quickly, exhausted from the emotional whiplash of a long day. He didn't fully understand. Claire sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, watching him in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. She gently stroked his cheek. In the quiet of this room, she didn't have to pretend. She let the mask slip. Anger, fear, and profound confusion churned inside her. A silent storm threatening to pull her under. The agreement to meet Adam felt like a court summons. She was the judge, the prosecutor, and the victim all at once. She didn't know what to expect. More lies, more justifications, or the raw, unvarnished truth that might hurt worse than the deception. She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes were red and puffy, evidence of the breakdown she'd had in the shower. She dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, armor woven of cotton to hide her fragility. She took a deep breath, kissed Leo's forehead one last time, and walked out of the room toward the battlefield. The lobby coffee shop was mostly empty now. Only a few scattered guests sat at distant tables, lost in their own worlds. Adam was already there, sitting at the exact same table in the corner, facing the entrance as if waiting for his executioner. He looked worse than he did that morning. Pale, defeated, with a small bandage on the back of his hand from an 4. He didn't look like the confident, mysterious man on the plane or the husband trying to defend his cowardice. He looked like a man who had lost everything. Claire marched over and sat across from him without a word. The silence between them was suffocating, heavy with 3 years of unspoken questions. Adam broke at first. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, his voice raspy. "And thank you for helping me on the beach." "I didn't do it for you," Claire replied coldly. "I did it because my son was watching." The words stung and Adam simply nodded, accepting the blow. "I know I don't have much time," Claire said, cutting straight to the point. "I want answers, not excuses, not justifications. I want the whole truth, Adam. No matter how ugly it is. After that, I will decide what happens next and most importantly what happens with Leo." Adam looked at her and for the first time, Claire saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't fear or shame anymore. It was a bottomless despair. Total surrender. He let out a long breath, sounding like he was releasing years of toxic pressure. "The story I told you this morning wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either," he began. "It's true. Knew I was in debt. But the problem was much, much bigger. It wasn't just loan sharks." He hesitated, looking at his hands. "I inadvertently got tied up in something incredibly dirty. At the firm in New York, a few of the senior partners were running a massive money laundering scheme for an international cartel. Because of my position, I was unknowingly used as the signatory. I signed off on shell accounts, approved transfers that never should have cleared. First, I had no idea. By the time I figured it out, I was in too deep." Claire Iyer listened in silence, her jaw clenched tight. This was worse than a bad movie script. "I tried to back out," Adam continued, staring blankly at the table. "But they don't just let you walk away. I knew too much. The threats started. Real threats, Claire. Not just emails. One night, a black SUV ran my car off the interstate. They said it was just a warning. Then they sent me photos." Adam's voice broke. "Photos of you dropping Leo off at his preschool in Brooklyn. They knew exactly where we lived. Routines. I realized this wasn't about going to jail anymore. This was about keeping you two alive." A familiar icy dread washed over Claire. The threat was real. It wasn't an abstract excuse anymore. "I went to the only person at the firm I thought I could trust. Mr. Garrison. My mentor. Adam said he was the one who helped me. He formulated the plan. The storm during the retreat was real. The boat capsizing was real. But Garrison had arranged for a local fishing boat to be waiting for me just outside the harbor before the weather got too bad. He made sure my name was on the manifest. He handled the payout to make it look legitimate. I had to die in the eyes of the world so the cartel would think the paper trail died with me. It was the only way to get them off your back." The story was insane. Yet Adam's desperate tone and the specific details made it undeniably real. "And the woman. Mia? Claire asked, her voice still sharp. Mia is Garrison's daughter, Adam replied. He sent her to keep an eye on me, to help me set up the aliases. We bounced from one small town to another, never staying anywhere too long. We posed as a couple to avoid suspicion. But there's nothing between us, Claire. I swear to God she's like a little sister to me. Her life was ruined because she had to help me hide. That explanation peeled off one layer of Claire's pain, the sting of romantic betrayal, but it did nothing to ease the agony of abandonment. Why didn't you tell me? Claire hissed, the question burning a hole in her chest. Why didn't you give me a choice? We could have run together, entered witness protection, fought it as a family, and drag you into a life on the run, Adam countered, his eyes welling with tears. Make you look over your shoulder every single day. Make Leo grow up hiding in cheap motel under fake names. I couldn't do it, Claire. I'd rather have my son think I was dead than watch him live in terror because of my screw-up. I chose to carry the isolation alone. That wasn't your choice to make, Claire snapped, her voice rising before she reeled it back in. We were a family. You robbed me of my right to fight by your side. I know, Adam whispered, and it is the greatest regret of my life. I was so panicked, so terrified that I made the most selfish decision possible. I thought I was protecting you, but I just destroyed you in a different way. Silence fell over them again. Claire tried to process the massive weight of it all. It explained so much. His stress in the months leading up to the trip, the sudden frantic business travels, it all fit into a horrifying puzzle. So what happened at the beach today? Claire asked. Your panic attack. What triggered it? Adam swallowed hard. I saw someone in the crowd. I wasn't 100% sure. But the guy looked exactly like one of the cartel's fixers from New York. I don't know if he was just on vacation or if they somehow tracked me down. That's when the panic hit. The terror that after all this they found me. The terror that I just brought the danger right to your doorstep by being at the same hotel. The reality made Claire's stomach drop. The threat wasn't over. They were still in danger. This vacation had turned into a trap. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Claire, Adam said, his voice laced with absolute resignation. No amount of apologies will ever make up for the 3 years of hell I put you through. I won't ask you to take me back. I don't deserve it, but I am begging you for the rest of my miserable life. Please let me see Leo. The please struck Claire right in the heart. Let me be a father to him, even if it's from a distance. Let me watch him grow. I'll do whatever you say. I'll disappear again tomorrow, if that's what you command, but please give me one chance to hold my boy just once. Tears finally spilled over Adam's cheeks. The tears of a broken man who had lost his entire world over one fatal error. Claire stared at him for a long time. The blinding rage had burned out, replaced by a cold, hollow exhaustion and an agonizing dilemma. On one hand, she wanted to shield Leo from this man, from the danger and the lies. But on the other hand, she saw the longing in Leo's eyes every single day. She knew how desperately her son wanted a father. Did she have the right to steal that from him to protect her own wounded pride? She made her decision. Not as a betrayed wife, but as a mother. Fine, she said, her voice resolute. You can see him tomorrow morning. But on my terms. Adam looked up, a spark of desperate hope in his tear-filled eyes. I supervise, Claire commanded. I pick the time, the place, and the boundaries. You will not tell him the truth about the cartel or faking your death. Not yet. We start slow and we see how it goes. I'm not doing this for you, Adam. I'm doing this for Leo. Adam nodded frantically, unable to form words. Thank you. God, Claire, thank you. Don't thank me. Claire cut him off, standing up. Save it. You owe that boy for the rest of your life. The conversation was over. She had the truth. She demanded a complicated, terrifying truth. She didn't feel better. She didn't feel relieved. She just felt deeply, unimaginably tired. As she walked back to her room, she knew there was no going back to her old life in Brooklyn. The gates to the past were locked forever, and the road ahead was obscured by fog and uncertainty. Morning arrived draped in doubt. Claire woke up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. The conversation played on a loop, leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. Looking out from the balcony, the new dawn this island promised wasn't bright and golden, but a muted, overcast gray, matching her mood perfectly. Today, she had to do something that felt simultaneously right and entirely wrong. She had to reunite a boy with his dead father, the man who was the source of all their pain. She woke Leo up gently. "Morning, kiddo." Leo stretched and rubbed his eyes. "Morning, Mum." As they ate room service breakfast, Claire searched for the right words. How do you explain this madness to an 8-year-old? She decided to stick to the simplest version of the truth. "Leo, I remember the man we saw at the beach yesterday," she asked carefully. Leo nodded around a mouthful of toast. "The sick guy, right?" "Yeah, his name is Adam," Claire said, the name tasting foreign on her tongue. "And he really wants to meet you just to talk for a bit. Is that okay?" Leo stopped chewing. He looked at his mom in total confusion. "Why, I don't know him." He knew Daddy," Claire said, opting for a partial lie. "And he looks a lot like him. I think that's why he wants to say hi." Leo thought about it. Curiosity won over his confusion. "Okay, but you're staying with me, right? Always." "I'm not going anywhere," Claire promised, kissing his head. Her chest ached from the deception. But the full truth was too heavy for his small shoulders to carry. They agreed to meet at a quiet garden gazebo on the edge of the resort property away from the main pools. When Claire and Leo arrived, Adam was already there sitting with his back to the path. He was wearing a simple white button-down, bouncing his leg nervously. Hearing their footsteps, he turned around. Claire could see the sheer panic and anticipation on his face. This was his judgment day. Claire squeezed Leo's hand. "That's him." They walked up. The air was incredibly awkward. Adam stood up, his hands awkwardly hovering at his sides. His eyes were locked onto Leo. The boy hid slightly behind Claire's leg, staring at the strange man with a mix of apprehension and deep curiosity. "Hi, Leo," Adam said, his voice trembling. He knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy. "Madam, it's really good to meet you." Leo didn't say anything, just peeking out from behind his mom. Claire gave him a gentle nudge. "Say hi, honey." "Hi," Leo mumbled softly. An agonizing silence fell over them. Adam looked desperate, entirely unsure of how to break the ice. Then his eyes caught something. On Leo's wrist was a frayed friendship bracelet made of red, white, and blue string. It was old and worn out. "That's a really cool bracelet," Adam said, a sad, nostalgic smile touching his lips. "A long time ago, I used to make bracelets just like that for a really brave little boy." Low down at his wrist, Mom said, "My dad gave me this." "She's right," Adam said, his eyes welling up. "That little boy loved spiders. So, when we made that bracelet we had a secret song. A song about a little spider climbing up a pipe. Do you remember the song?" Leo furrowed his brow, trying to access a memory buried deep in his toddler years. Adam began to sing very softly, a silly, familiar melody. The itsy-bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Leo's eyes suddenly went wide. A flash of profound recognition sparked in them. It was a memory locked away. A song only his father used to sing to him right before bed. It was their secret code. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. Leo whispered, finishing the verse. Adam stopped singing. The tears spilled over, tracing tracks down his cheeks. He couldn't hold it back anymore. "Leo," he choked out. And right then, every wall in Leo's mind shattered. He didn't see a stranger who looked like his dad. He saw his dad. The hesitation vanished, replaced by an absolute certainty blooming from the very bottom of his heart. He let go of Claire's hand and with a breathless gasp, sprinted into the man's arms. "Dad!" Adam caught the small boy, crushing him to his chest as if terrified he would evaporate. He buried his face in Leo's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry. Leo hugged him back just as fiercely, his face buried in Adam's neck, crying silently. It was the release of 3 years of pent-up longing. Claire stood frozen, watching the scene. Her heart felt like it was in a vice-crushing agony mixed with overwhelming relief. She cried silently, tears streaming down her face. She wept for the 3 years they had lost, for the lies she had to tell, and for the joy of her son finally finding his missing piece. They spent the rest of the day together. A fractured, awkward, deeply wounded family trying to find a rhythm. Claire kept her distance, letting the father and son rebuild their bridge. They went down to the sand, and this time they built a massive sand castle together. Adam showed Leo how to pack the wet sand to make strong towers. They laughed when the tide rushed in and wiped out the moat. For a few hours under the Hawaiian sun, they looked like a normal family, a beautiful, fragile illusion. In the late afternoon, while Leo ran back to the room to grab a forgotten toy, Claire and Adam sat side by side on a bench facing the Pacific. "Thank you," Adam said quietly. "I did it for Leo," Claire replied, staring straight ahead. "Like I said," she paused. "What's your plan now?" "I have to leave," he said. "Mia and I can't stay here. It's not safe. We'll find somewhere more remote, but I'll stay in touch. I won't disappear again. I swear to you." "How does this end, Adam?" Claire asked. "You can't run forever. Garrison is trying to find a legal loophole with the feds in New York to dismantle the cartel's hold, but it's going to take years," he admitted. "For now, the only thing I can do is make sure you two stay completely disconnected and safe." They sat in silence again, listening to the waves. "I can't forgive you, Adam," Claire said finally, her voice steady. "I probably never will. You broke my trust. You shattered our life. What we had died and was buried with that empty casket." Adam looked down at his hands. "I know," but Claire continued. "I won't stop you from being his father. He needs you, but it happens on my terms. Understand?" Adam looked up at her, infinite gratitude shining in his tired eyes. "Understand. Whatever you say." As the sun began to set, turning the horizon into a blaze of orange and violet, Leo came running back to them. He grabbed Adam's hand, then reached out and grabbed Claire's. "Let's watch the sunset together." Adam looked at Claire silently, asking for permission. Claire gave a slow nod. The 3 of them walked down to the water's edge. Leo stood in the middle, holding both their hands. To a passing tourist, they looked like the perfect American family. But Claire knew the truth. They were 3 people bound by deep love and profound betrayal, trying to navigate a terrifyingly uncertain future. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't even a fresh start. It was just a pause, a fragile moment at dusk. Claire stared at the vast ocean. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring or the next year. But for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel entirely alone in carrying the weight of the world. The new dawn in Hawaii hadn't brought her simple happiness. It had brought a complex, messy truth. A truth that forced her to be stronger, wiser, and to redefine what a family meant. And in the ruins of her past, she found a new kind of hope. Not a hope for resurrected romance, but a hope for an honest future for her son. And for right now that was